about today's program?
Sure, absolutely. So the Harlem Renaissance was just such a unique era in music, art, literature. It was a time when there was this real sense of Black pride in the arts, and there was a tremendous amount of output from that area. And it's kind of like one of those, if I could time travel, not only would I want to go to Belle Epoque, France, I'd also want to go to the Harlem Renaissance because it just would have been such a great place for just the music scene alone would have just kept me going for a long, long time. I do want to just put a quick footnote in that we're going to be looking at artists and musicians from that era, but the works that we're either seeing or listening to may not necessarily come from that era. And a lot of it just has to do with what we could get the rights, to show. So, don't be surprised if you see something from 1980, for example, and say, wait a minute, that's not when the Harlem Renaissance was. But we're trying to get the spirit of the Harlem Renaissance, the players from the Harlem Renaissance who were so important to both the music and art fields, which is what we're focusing on today.
Thanks, Charlie. And I do want to thank Smithsonian American Art Museum for having such a wonderful collection for us. And the first piece that we're going to look at is we ended part one with Lois Mailou Jones's painting. This particular painting that Remy spoke about, which is Brother Brown, and we're going to start with that today to kind of tie last time to this part of the presentation.
Today, I'm not hearing any of the music.
Yeah, no.
Could you not hear the music? Oh, let's try it one more time then. Okay. Let's try it one more time. Technology today. Well, it's just been a little bit challenging the last couple of days. Let's see. We were just talking about Saturn. What is it? Mercury retrograde.
Mercury retrograde.
We were just talking about that. Let's see.
Don't keep blaming poor Mercury. It's already going backwards. Don't blame Mercury. It's already going backwards.
Could you hear it now?
Yes. No, your volume is not on.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you check those boxes when you share the screen?
I'm sorry?
Did you check the boxes for sharing audio?
Oh, that's awful. Sorry about that. Hold on, let me try one more thing.
We're all used to it. COVID era,
Yeah. The music is so good, it'll be worth the wait.
Exactly.
Love the stuff you've chosen, Charlie.
If not, Charlie has to sing it. That's what we're left
Get
with.
my guitar.
I love it. So it's either the volume of is your computer muted? Maybe your computer is muted.
Could you hear it now?
There we go. Yes.
Oh, okay, good.
But it's very low. It's not playing through the computer.
Yeah.
Thank you for being patient with us.
Let's start again. We need to hear the whole song. I think that's especially the first line.
Okay. Oh no. We can start for sure.
I'm gonna sit right down and write myself a letter and make believe it came from you. I'm gonna write words oh so sweet, they're gonna knock me off my feet.
go. There's Fats Waller, certainly a giant from the time of the Harlem Renaissance. You know, maybe his most famous song is "Ain't Misbehaving." If you don't know that particular song, that's another really famous one. But you know, he was someone who was such an important presence in the in the Harlem Renaissance, and apparently he was a really prolific songwriter. And they think that he actually wrote many songs than the ones that are credited to him, because if he was in financial trouble, he would just sell the rights to a song to whoever was the highest bidder, so in order to make more money for himself. But you know, he was just a real character, and apparently was known for just being so easygoing, so relaxed. He was known to be just a real calming presence, for example, in the recording studio. So I like the fact that there's that song "Sit Right Down," you know, which this guy is doing. Plus he looks really relaxed, so kind of, for me, the song worked well with this particular painting.
Thank you, Charlie. It's interesting that also the artist, this artist, because we're going to talk about her for the next couple of pieces, I think it's important to see her watercolor in this one, also her watercolor used in this one. We talked about it a little bit last time. We're looking at somebody who used to also play music. Lois Melly Jones played the piano. She was also a dancer, and she was definitely responsible for educating, you know, that generation of artists, and she was an instructor at Howard University. And I think that kind of versatility had also opened her up to use different materials for her art, because you can't look at one artwork from her and then look at another and be able to tell that's Lois Melly Jones's piece. I think she had she was also kind of a person that tried out things, and she was very successful at doing multiple things at once. And I think that her art also shows that versatility. And this is one of the pieces of her watercolor.
I think that's right. I think, you know, when we see the other pieces that we're going to talk about today, you'll see how completely different this work is from her other work. You know, she's someone who started off as a textile artist, and I think you'll see that influence in some of the pieces that we'll show today. But, you know, this one, I don't think you'd have any sense that, you know, one had to be a textile artist to do a work like this. But for me, I always love it when a work has visual themes that are sort of repeated within the work itself. So, for example, you know, here we have this big potato sack with these big round images within the potato sack, and then you have his big belly, you know, that sort of mirrors that, and his big cheeks, you know, that we see on his face. So I love it when you see those multiplicity of forms within the same work. And it's a very charming image. And again, completely different from the next one that we're going to show.
Exactly. I love the technique of tricking the eye in a way that if we look at the shirt, there is purple and there's blue. There's hardly any white, but if you ask me what color shirt is he wearing, I would immediately say white. And I think that kind of tricking the eye, that skill, that kind of mastery is only seen with certain artists. So I appreciate it. The next piece is a really good one, actually, because we have gone back and forth talking about this piece, and I'll let Dimitri and Rodney talk about it.
Let's hear our music first.
All right.
It's a very entrancing phrase. It will put you in a daze. To me, it don't mean a thing, but it's got a very peculiar swing. Zazu, 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 zazu,
Yeah, I was about to.
So that's Cab Calloway, who, and you know, for me, if I had to think of one particular musician that I specifically associate with the Harlem Renaissance would be Cab Calloway. You know, he worked in the Cotton Club in Harlem, and just filled in as the house band when Duke Ellington was on tour. And they had such a great response from the people at the club that he ended up just getting the house gig. And one of the things that he's really known for, his most famous song was called Minnie the Moocher, which has that same sort of call and response that you heard in the song there. I wanted to use something different so that people got a little bit a sense of some of his other work, but it has that same call and response. And, you know, he was a great dancer as well as a musician, and apparently a great athlete as well. He for a short time, he played in a professional basketball league, the Negro Leagues in basketball. So he was, and when they would go on tour with other bands, they would set up baseball games or basketball games with other musicians to play with while they were on the road to amuse themselves. Very talented guy.
Yeah, I'm obviously very taken by this piece. I just love it's just so fascinating to look at. And I know we have a little question we're going to throw at you guys in a second about it, but we'll have everyone take a look at it. One thing I like about it today that really struck me is that it has a lot of black and orange and really absolutely no blue.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things, you know, like what Charlie said is, you know, talking about her, Lois's career as a textile designer, that is not really well known, and that was actually her very first career. She was making art, but her bread and butter started off in textile design, and she actually was a freelance designer for a very well-to-do company in Boston where she first lived and studied, and then another one in New York. And sometime around the 30s and 40s, I don't remember the time. I don't know if you know at the time, Rodney. She became really disillusioned because she wasn't getting credit for her work. And so she made the decision to actually quit working in textiles for a very long time. It's not until the 1950s that she takes a trip to Haiti first. And then in the 60s and 70s, she travels around Africa, which if you're looking at this, I mean, you know, for me, it's like the first thing that pops in my head is kente cloth, not the faux kente cloth that you see around the United States a lot, but actual hand woven kente cloth made out of silk, where orange is a royal color. So that's immediately what I start to think of. And so she starts to incorporate that design aesthetic that she received from. Oh, you have poll questions. Me? Oh, sorry.
No, I really like that. I mean, you know, the connection to Africa. This is obviously an expression of great pride for her for that discovery. But yeah, I think our question for the audience was, you know, there's a lot of ways to look at it. Some of it almost pops out, but how many triangles are you guys? Take a look at this piece and see if you can tell us how many triangles you're seeing as you look at it. Because there's kind of triangles everywhere. And I do think that gives it a certain power. You know, it's a very powerful, very sturdy shape, right?
I'm not allowed to vote. That's not fair.
I know.
I know. My vote is for number 4. Whoever is counting has way
what are we like in? Are we in Georgia or something? What's going on here?
Joan is asking pyramid shape. Oh wow.
Y'all.
Yeah.
Pyramids, triangles.
Yeah. So, and when the person who mentions pyramids, I think this is 3-dimensional. I think some of that stuff really pops out at you.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just in Montreal, and there they have a geodesic dome that they created for Expo 67 that was done by Buckminster Fuller. And Fuller, thought that was like the most stable form that you could use. And then if you put it in a dome form, it resists, hurricanes and earthquakes and things like that. So, you think about the strength of pyramids and how important they are, but they're also really important in art. You see that constantly, especially in Renaissance art, how they're using the triangle to really lock down your eyes within a piece to make you really engage with it within a piece. And this one, I see that there's a comment here that this clearly has a quilt reference, and it really does have that feel to it. And again, just that geometric patterning is so powerful because it really does make your foreground and background switch back and forth if you let it play with your eyes.
Well, here we go. The result is
You all got too much time on your hands. That's the result.
Yeah, so that's interesting because I started counting today. I started counting, which was sort of a mistake because I was really tight on time. And so it ended up being just on the top part. I think I counted close to 100. But then what does a triangle mean? Is like, which one, do we have 1 and then 2 and 3 and 4? And so that's when I stopped and we did the range. So it's a good one to spend some time and meditate on, but also for all the other reasons that we just talked about. But also, can we stop and just look at the difference between her style here and here?
And we have some comments in chat. So Pi says it clearly has a quilt reference.
Absolutely.
Could absolutely imagine this being like a Gee's Bend kind of quilt. Sarah's wondering who counted the triangles and who verified the count. We all had a big fight about this.
I cannot take responsibility for it. I could not go on. I just stopped on the top.
I think we decided to leave it to the wisdom of crowds.
Yes.
And then Katharina says it has a centering effect to look at it. Yeah, you are kind of, because it is really an up. I can see like a real equator there, an upper and a lower portion of it.
Are we talking Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt abstractly?
Oh wow, that's a great interpretation.
Let's just get deep right now.
I also really want to know, the piece is titled Suriname, and so I immediately wanted to make connections with cloth in Suriname, but I don't think I was able to. So I don't know if anyone out in the crowd.
Didn't we, Dimitri? We looked at the flag.
I think we may have seen some of the colors in the flag. But yeah, I just kind of wonder if some of our audience knows or has a guess as to why Lois may have named this Suriname. Because I don't.
Are we familiar with any sort of codification that she has used in her pieces? I know that she uses kind of masks and things like that. There's definitely some type of story narration, but codification of some sort. And this definitely tells me that there is something in there, much like the quilts that Pi mentioned.
And then getting back to the black and orange, now I want to note that she did sign her name in black on the orange in a triangle.
Why Suriname though? Yeah, I'm just as curious. Yeah. Let's move on to the next piece, which is also by the same artist. So it's this one.
Get you in a taxi, honey. Please be ready by 8:30. Oh, honey, don't be late.
Oh, I lost the music.
Gonna dance on both of my shoes when they play the Jelly Roll Blues. Tomorrow night.
So that's Alberta Hunter, who was another important musician from the Harlem Renaissance period. And, like a number of the musicians that we talked about last time, she started singing in a bordello because that's where, musicians could get jobs fairly easily. And then one of the things that she was known for was that she was able to riff lyrics immediately, and she was able to sort of please the crowd by doing these bawdy lyrics. And so, if you go into her catalog, you will see some bawdy songs. And that was one of her appeal as a music, as a singer and a musician. And it's interesting because her as a cause of because of the depression, she ended up really not being able to sustain her livelihood as a musician, and so she became a nurse and worked for many years as a nurse, and then had a renaissance of her career when she was in her 80s. So it was interesting. Another thing that's kind of interesting about her is that she was a lesbian, which, she would keep her own sexuality very, very private. It was not something that she wanted. And now, and certainly during that period of time, that would have worked against her. So she's someone who has a lot of different interesting aspects to her personality and to her music. And she's
Charlie's okay. Oh, Lucarissa, did you want to go on?
Sure, I'm sorry. I kind of heard some noise and I wasn't sure if I was even connected anymore.
I'm telling you, are you sure, Remy, this is the retrograde is over?
It's not over.
It's okay.
It's not. It's not over until the black lady sings.
Stop it. Anyway, I absolutely love this piece. It's it's so colorful, and I just love colorful pieces. And I think in the chat someone was mentioning whether or not it was a batik, and if I'm remembering properly, this is another one of her watercolors, but it's so drastically different from the Brother Brown piece that we looked at initially. She's a fascinating artist to me. The fact that she has a 7-decade career. I think we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and that she did her art well into the age of her 90s, or I believe she was 92 when she passed away. And she just has so many different approaches and so many different processes that she uses. And as Dimitri said earlier, she started out with textile design. She also began using watercolors, and apparently her parents had bought a house on Martha's Vineyard, and so she was able to meet up with a lot of people who actually influenced her life and her art, such as the sculptor Meta Warrick Fuller and composer Harry Burleigh and Dorothy West. So they all just kind of, influenced what she did. She also held her first exhibition at the age of 17 in Martha's Vineyard, which is impressive in itself. Her style has shifted and evolved multiple times because of the influences in her life, her travels, as Dimitri also mentioned. One of the things that she talked about a lot, actually, as I read more and more about her, was that while she had such pride in her African roots and her African American ancestry, she kind of resented being called an African American artist. She felt that her greatest contribution to the art world was proof of talent of Black artists, and she wanted to be just known as an American painter with no labels. And I love that about her. Her work is just, it's amazing. I'm particularly intrigued by how she, in this particular piece, how she, has such bold colors, and then on the periphery, she has all of these different kinds of lines, very thin lines, very heavy lines. There's the black background that kind of fades in and fades out. And it's a very interesting piece, very interesting piece.
And I think the next artist that we're going to talk about is also a kind of a
so Dave, we can barely hear you.
Oh, really? I'm sorry. Okay. Can you hear me now?
I
Okay.
do. Look, Carissa, I think it's your computer.
Is it my computer?
I think so. We hear her fine. We hear Sade fine. I'm sorry.
I
Okay,
think
Oh
there's
no.
also
it's
an
not
interesting
working.
comment
Mercury
from Joan, who
retrograde.
says that it seems to play an aerial view against straight on. I just think, when you look at, we've shown three different pieces now from Jones. I think you can really get a sense of her breath. I mean, look at the first piece that we showed of the man sitting there with the potato sack. You would not think that this is the same artist. And then, of course, if you look at that, the one with the very patterned shape, again, you would just never think that. It's just, for me, I just love all these sort of intimations of shapes. If you could just keep it on that view for just a second, for example, to me, it really looks like there's a yellow cab. That's in the back part of it. You also see what looks like a guitar, maybe even a piano, perhaps a wine bottle or some sort of liquor bottle. I mean, there's just all these different things, and your mind can really go free with this piece, trying to trying to take everything in.
Yeah.
And I also
Also,
think that
Ralph is seeing it. Oh, sorry, Lucrezia.
no, I was just gonna say that I also think that the line work. I believe we talked about this today, where it looks like it's just one line that she's kind of gone through. You can see the beginning, and then you can really kind of trace where she went around, and where it ends. So that's in itself is fascinating. She just took that one line and really worked with it.
I'm really struck by the border around it. I find that really interestingly done. The how that's like it's bordered by this. Oh, I guess
There's
there's an
an
echo.
echo of some kind coming in. So yeah, and so with this also we started. Yes, I agree. I agree. It's wild. Oh, you see the bird too, Shari. Yes, I saw the bird first thing. I saw the bird with wings too. And also when uh, um, Shigefatsu says that it's also wild that this is watercolor. I agree. I agree. I think that what she does with watercolor is incredible. And again, I know you've joined us a few times. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. If not, please, yeah, excuse me and correct me. And the next artist that we're going to look at, and of course, my colleagues here know that I am pretty much obsessed with William H. Johnson. But before, let's listen to the music pairing and the artwork.
Hey, up in Harlem at a table for two. There were four of us. Me, your big Pete, and you. From your ankle up, I'll say you sure are sweet. From that down, there's too much feet. Yes, your feet's too big. Don't want you 'cause your feet's too big. Can't use you 'cause your feet's too big.
I love that. I can't hear you because your feet's too big. So that again is Fats Waller. And, we've shown William H. Johnson before. And, I think he's really one of our favorites as a panel, just because of his playfulness and his use of color and his sort of distortion of perspective. But this particular piece, it's called Jitterbug, and it's just couldn't be more expressive of what it would be like dancing. If we could pan back to the whole thing for just a second today, I mean, look at the way that the woman is leaning into the guy so strongly that her legs look like they're almost dragging. So you can imagine that there perhaps some mind-altering substances that were involved before the dancing went on, and again, this is another example where an artist is deliberately tickling more than one sense at a time, right? Obviously, we have the visual of these two people dancing, but he's very deliberately putting these instruments in the background, which, you know, forces us to imagine that there's music or sound going on in the background. And so, you know, for me, it's not just the music that I hear. I can hear like the shuffling of the feet on this, you know, what looks like maybe a linoleum or wood floor. So it's just a lovely piece. Look at the smiles of the two people, you know, dancing. It's great.
And you know, there's so many things to love about William H. Johnson. And one of the things is something that we just talked about, Lois Miller Jones, is the ability to do many types of art, many different types of art, and still maintain that distinct artistic styles for each of the sort of styles that he started doing, because he was a kind of a realist. And he studied in New York, he studied in France, in different parts of Europe, other parts of Europe, and also he made a trip to Tunisia and other parts of Africa, just really taking it all in. And when he came back to the U.S. is when he started doing this type of folkish, it's kind of like folk art, that somewhat also broke away from the education that he had gotten, the practice that he had gotten. And in a way, he also wanted to connect back to his African American community here in the US, specifically South Carolina. And I think he kind of pays homage to the music, and he pays homage to familiar relationships and all of that in his art. And one of the things that you will notice with his artwork is that, as simple as it seems, it might seem, that you notice that your eyes have been tricked into thinking that's a floor and that's all you need to have. And he divides his art into in 3 parts. And you'll notice this in different pieces that he has done with, especially with the Jitterbug series. There's many of them. I don't know. He's my favorite artist, period. And so I like this piece so much for that reason as well, that the fact that it's just things look like applique, cut out and pasted, is what he kind of smooshes them and makes them two-dimensional almost. And but there's so much depth in them, so that's what I appreciate about it. Yeah.
I also love I love a particular detail that he has too. If you can, I'm not sure if you can go down to the man's leg, you can see that he's put like very, very small hairs on the man's leg, which I think are really hilarious. But, you know, if you look at the way, for example, look at the way the fingernails are done, you know, I can't help but think that Kerry James Marshall spent a lot of time looking at this man's work. You know, there's really a lot of similarities that you can draw that you know, that Marshall would have thought about when he was doing his own work.
And this
Great
is
stuff.
then this is screen print on paperboard, which is different from his other ones that he paints. This is a screen print. So to think about, if you know, those of us who have attempted to do screen print or who have done screen print, it's not easy. It's not an easy system. But for him also, this whole process is just, I think, breaking away from his regular, what we know as his kind of William H. Johnson style, and then going all the way to screen printing and doing this with these colors is, to me, is just so amazing. And while we're on the same artist, let's move on to the next one.
Why should it be you got the power to hypnotize me? Let me live with your spell. You do that voodoo that you do so well. You
That particular piece is Dorothy Dandridge singing, who had a career both as a singer and as a movie star. She was the first Black star, period, to be nominated for Academy Award for a sort of a modernized version of Carmen, called Carmen Jones. And she was someone who was very particular about her choice of roles in Hollywood. And so because of that, she didn't want to do stereotypical roles. And so because of that, you don't see her in a lot of movies, but this is an example of her singing. I frankly don't know a lot about her.
Charlie, your sound is breaking up a little bit. Sorry.
Oh,
Or
I'm
is it
sorry.
just-
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's just the speaker was a little bit muffled.
Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, and thank you, Charlie, for letting me choose this one because I kind of mixed it with another song. So it was, it's kind of magical, I think. It's kind of magical what artists do and what they let us see. There's something magical about it that's sort of inexplicable sometimes. And I chose that song, and it also reminds me of Shoop by Salt and Pepper. And so that reminded me of that. And I don't know, for some reason I couldn't quite make the connection, but I chose this song. And I can play the music again because I think Dimitri is telling me that it was muffled. The sound itself is old and recording also, and so it might be muffled generally. Let's see it.
Why should it be? You've got the power to hypnotize me. Let me live beneath your spell. You do that voodoo that you do so well. You do.
From that track, the word that sticks out to me is hypnotized, because I think, when you look at Johnson's work, there's a hypnotic quality to it. Today just kind of if you can stop at the just the full image, rather than kind of moving around. He if you've seen our previous tour, that entirely focused on William H. Johnson and his work, he started off with extreme formal training. Like, he knows how to paint like, the old Italian masters, for example, very, very photorealistically. And in the 1930s, when he returns to the United States, to get more in touch with his roots. Like, he had been so far removed from his African American identity and culture and family, that he adopted this primitive style. So, when you look at this, the chair, someone just mentioned the stool and in the foreground, whether it's in the foreground, he flattens all of the furniture intentionally. So it's very, very flat and lacks the three-dimensionality, except for that you can tell, from the girls, that they're clearly sitting on those chairs. And, if you look at the girl that's the closest to us, and she's got this kind of lavender dress on, and if you start to look at the shapes from that center point, you can kind of see how he's building and spinning around, and just creates this whirlwind and this movement, through the shapes that he uses, also the colors that, there's darker variations on the table or the palette that they're working off of. There's a darker variation of that same purplish blue behind them in the cracks between the chairs. And so it's like he's using all of his knowledge of design and composition, and color to create this thing that's making this really magical, again, like the song says, hypnotic thing that we're looking at. And that's one of the things I really appreciate about his work. Who am I sharing this with? Is that Remy also?
I think basically you said it all, Dimitri. Really, I mean,
No, I didn't.
well, there's always more to say because The work is beautiful. But I think for me, you were talking about that hypnotic and that state of being that they're in doing this art, or their art. Somebody was talking about their eyes might be closed while they're painting. But as I was looking at the whole piece, from when you look at the whole piece, to me, I actually see them almost like at a church pew, that kind of energy, that kind of state of being in their body, that reverence that one would sit in at church. And I think for many of us, art is our church anyway. So I think, there's a comment that maybe he's making as well. It's just something that was devoted to and did extremely well at as well. And just the last thing I'll say is just if we look at the lower half and how he's created the floor, and even though the background is all in one color, he still managed to create a floor space of these floorboards and a back wall with perhaps something on it as well. So yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
want to
Kendra is.
go ahead.
I wasn't gonna read the whole thing, but just kind of noticing Kendra's comment about when you really look at the skin on their face. I definitely had this thing also, about them having the different skin tones going on, and just kind of wondering what he was doing with that. The girl that's the closest to us, there's a lighter brown just around her eyes and her nose, so perhaps that's a reflection. But the one behind, has the darker skin only on the face and not on the neck. These are inexplicable things that Johnson just does, decisions that he makes. And unfortunately, most of his work was, yeah, and actually, and she says the first figure looks fine, but if we zoom in on it, it's really splotchy and kind of like, what is going on here? But yeah, so if you go back to our YouTube channel and look at our previous tour talking about Johnson, he died and didn't, so the artist didn't leave us with his reasons for why he made decisions. He died, and this huge collection of thousands and thousands of works were found in a warehouse and then donated to the Smithsonian. So no one knows except for, they're just guessing that, he taught at a community center. He taught art to children at a community center in Harlem when he returned, and perhaps these are his students. Did he consider the piece finished and ready for public consumption? We don't know, because he died without us, having a clue as to what his intentions were.
And also just to add on to that is what he was working on. And the I think this is like a plywood or something like that. And so that may, I think that
Yep, it is.
yeah.
Plywood, yeah.
And how would that have made a difference in terms of applying the paint and shades and tones and textures, and how does what we work on add to the story or help tell the story? And what his, again, why did he use plywood? Was that all that was around? I mean, there's endless things that we could put onto that, but I think it's also interesting when we choose a background or a ground and then we start applying how that bursts through and talks to us as well.
That's a really good point, Remy. Because I don't usually think about the background, the background, the material that you put paint on. I don't always think about that. And he has also painted on burlap, which is interesting to me. Yeah, so I'm glad that you pointed that out. And yeah.
And since he is trained, he would know, would have known the difference between paper and canvas and different textures, and so it makes me wonder what else he was exploring.
I think that thank you, Remy and Dimitri. The next piece, actually, the folks that are going to cover it, Rodney and Lucarisa, would like us to look at the piece first before we listen to the music. And so I'm interested in and seeing your thoughts. There we go.
You know, for me, I want people to look at it and just, I always want to know what your gut reaction is to seeing something before you understand what the context is. So that's what I wanted. But Lucrezia, do we want to hear the music or?
Kendra says regal, royal Americans. First impression. Any other thoughts? I'm really curious. Community, Katrina says, yeah.
And is there like a mood that people get from this? I really like that comment. Community.
Coming to church.
Coming to church in a line.
Sarah says coming to church in line.
Attending a wedding. Being a part of a group together. Such a sense of destination. Going to a protest. Women as leaders.
Intergenerational.
Red, white, and blue. I did not notice that before, which is important, I think.
And very well dressed. Yes. Those are great thoughts.
You want to play the music now, Sade?
Sure thing. There we go.
And I want to read Sherry's comment in chat before we kind of jump in. She says, I want to know what they are lining up for. Is it happy or sad? I thought of the Japanese being round up for internment and hope I am wrong. I don't have a good sense of their facial expressions. So Lucrezia, what should we tell them about the context of this painting?
Well, someone came really close to it. I can't see in the chat anymore, but yeah, it was actually based on the civil rights marches in Alabama. So yes, definitely the women were the unsung heroes in that whole process. And so Charles Alston created this very vibrant painting to depict this group of women walking. And the shapes that he uses and the slabs of color, kind of give us that feeling of strength and sturdiness. And so he was inspired by the Montgomery bus boycott, and he employed this kind of abstraction technique to kind of evoke that whole resolute energy, that sustained the people who were protesting for better than a year in the 1950s. And when I was, looking at this really closely, I just thought, as someone was saying, you can barely tell what the faces are like, but the way the faces are shaped and how they are, looking towards the future is what I see, is that, that they are focused on their future and they are together. And the fact that they, they have their children with them and babies with them, they're incorporating families. And then also, what stood out for me was when I think of the boycotts, I think about the women who were the maids and, they couldn't ride the buses, and you would often see them, in their maid uniforms, getting the rides and the cabs and things. But in this, you're seeing people who are well-dressed. So these weren't just, the people who were going to their jobs as maids and stuff. These were people who were had some kind of substance, to their lives. They were, when you look at the dresses and the shapes of the dresses, it's like, wow, these are people, everyone was in on this. And so there's such a sense of continuity, such a sense of camaraderie, and resolution. You know, we're going to get this thing done, and all of us are going to play a part in getting this thing done. So I like how that feeling.
Yeah, I think I really like that that context that you gave us, Lucrecia. And like for me, one of the things that really strikes me is this woman on the right, and she's looking up. You know, she is looking to the heavens, and you know, this title of this is Walking, and it's from 1958. We today know that the Montgomery bus boycott was a key moment in U.S. history, and really one of the most successful, or really sparked the civil rights movement's most successful protests. We know now that it was a great success, but they didn't know at the time that it was going to be successful. And I don't think Charles Alston, he wouldn't have known in 1958 the understanding we'd have of this today. And yet it really speaks to us. Like we see so much of our history in this painting.
Yes, and actually he made a statement, as you said, he would not have known. I mean, this was done in 58, before 1965 civil rights, right? And he said the idea of a march was growing. It was in the air, and this painting just came. I called it Walking on Purpose. So, you know, it's just like, wow. He was feeling that already, you know?
Yeah, it's a painting for the ages.
And I love the chat. What's coming in the chat as well is one thing that Kendra noticed is there a Band-Aid on the little child in the front? That's a question that came up. We talked about this a little bit, and Cherry sees their determination for sure. And Jihan says it was a strategy to dress well during protests. I think that's a really good point as well. So yeah, about the little child in the front, I think we talked about this. Charlie mentioned something.
Well, it reminds me of that Colonial War painting where you see, you know, a fife, a drummer, someone holding up a hat, and you know, one of them, I think it's the drummer, if I'm not mistaken, has a band around his head, and I'm just wondering if he's making a reference to that or not. I don't know the answer, but it certainly evokes that in my own mind when I see that.
Wow, thank you for participating in the chat. I love it.
I did want to just sort of, I think it's Ralph Gordon mentions that, you know, about the dresses being triangular, you know, just from an artistic point of view, you know, I think this is a really interesting painting. I mean, you can really see the influence of Cubism in this particular painting. And, you know, if you go back even further, you know, you can think about how Cezanne used to use these very geometric shapes to create natural forms and towns. You see that same idea in this painting. So I think that's a great comment on his part.
Yeah, and Kendra is pointing out the red as well. And yeah, this is the feeling the artists give me with the child protesting a future that has already been harmed children and Black people. That's a really good point. I think we can get so much out of this painting. And I appreciated how Lucrecia and Rodney wanted us to look at it first before we hear the music as well and see the title. The next painting is a bit more playful than this one, a bit playful. So let's look at it, Charlie and Lucrecia, and let's listen to the music first.
But I got something to tell you, baby, make the highlights on your head. Got something to tell you, baby, make the highlights on your head. So I got something to give you, sugar.
Well, starting with the music, that's Art Tatum. My dad was a jazz pianist, and Art Tatum was one of his absolute favorites. And you know, he was just a monster when it came to piano playing. That particular tune doesn't really show off his piano abilities, but you know, people would say that, you know, he was so good that they would switch instruments because they knew, you know, from piano to some other instrument, because they knew they couldn't possibly play as well as he could. And there's a very, very famous story about a cutting session, which is basically a face-off between jazz pianists, where he just made these really great pianists look like amateurs. And one of his albums is called God in the House, because if I'm not mistaken, I think it was Fats Waller was playing when Tatum walked in the room and said, I'm just playing the piano because God is in the house. He was that good of a piano player. Lucarissa, do you want to talk about the piece from an artistic point of view?
Okay, well, this piece actually relates to the geographic core of the African American community throughout history. Of course, the South was the epicenter of slavery and African American race as a whole. So this image kind of speaks to that. It also gives us an understanding of the colors and the weather and the imagery of Georgia. Is it Hale or Haley?
Yeah, Hale Woodruff.
Hale Woodruff, yes, thank you. Hale Woodruff, he actually led the art department at Atlanta University, which is a historically Black university. He was a teacher there, and often he would bring his students out of the classroom to paint outdoor scenes of Georgia. And this is a part of that, that whole work process. He also studied extensively the French Impressionist movement. And so you can kind of see those influences here in this piece. He lived in, and Charlie, I'm going to depend upon you for this because I forgot to look it up on how to pronounce it, but he lived in Cagnes-sur-Mer in the south of France. Is that even close?
You'll have to write it out for me, but sounds good. Sounds good.
It's Cagnes, sur-Mer.
Siegs, is it Sag-sur-Mer? Sur-Mer.
I'm gonna have to look that up. Yeah, but it's in the south of France, and so and it was apparently a very beautiful scenic village that overlooked the sea and the countryside. And so he lived there with Renoir and James Soutine, and so he would take their influences, of course, and add them to his painting techniques. And so I just thought that was really interesting. And he also soaked up the influences of the modernist. And so you can see all of that kind of coming together in this piece. He later on became a wonderful muralist, but at this time when he was doing this type of painting, his goal actually was to just become a great landscape painter. So I thought that was really interesting because obviously he's done a great job. I love the colors in this and how I'm not even sure how to describe what he's done here, but when you look at how it kind of causes the eye to look and think that it's painted in a concave way is the only way I can think of to say it, where it seems like, everything is kind of going towards the center. And I love the little marks that he makes, the shadings that he's using, and then he kind of lightens it up. I love the different tones of greens that he's placed in here. So this is a guy that's really out there, really paying attention to the landscape and just conveying it in this way. I love this.
Yeah, and I have to give a shout out to the Art Institute of Chicago, which is where he studied. They were one of the few institutions that would openly have Black students in them. And so you really see a lot of the artists from the Harlem Renaissance who got their start in Chicago, because of them. And he was a member of that group. And so they played such an, sort of like an ancillary role to the importance of the Harlem Renaissance, which is so great. But in terms of the piece, I agree with you. It's, it has, it almost feels mossy. You feel like you could almost touch this and that it would have a mossy feel to it. I love the way you put it, is that it really looks like it's in this concave mirror. I mean, it does play with we're almost looking at like a whirlpool on land when you see those trees turned around. It's a really interesting piece.
It reminds me of, I think it's the same. It is the same concept as when I look into fish fish eye, kind of one of those
Yes.
mirrors, you know, I can kind of, just all my surroundings kind of circle me. And yeah, I kind of like what Sherry said also is the center tree trunk and branches almost look like a hand holding up the tree of the world.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I love, like, you can really almost see human body parts in this painting.
Yes.
Yeah, just the other interesting thing about Hal Woodruff is that he was buddies with Romar Bearden, and the two of them started Spiral, which was a really important movement of Black artists. That really kind of, I think they kind of post-dated the Harlem Renaissance, but again, were really important in terms of producing Black original art. And so you have to put your hats off to that as well.
Yes.
Joan says you can really see Soutine's influence, almost surreal.
Yes, that's a great way of putting this. The surreal look. That's exactly the word I was looking for.
Yes, that's why we love having folks join us in these conversations. We have 3 or 4 pieces. If you hang on with us, we have 3 or 4 amazing pieces to bring you, and this one is definitely one of them.
Be the death of me, and when I'm always with you, I get the 3rd degree. That ain't right. I'll tell these fools anything but tell me the truth. Oh, that ain't right at all. What's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? Yes, you're taking all my money and going out having yourself a home.
Again, great piece that features Fats Waller on piano and Etta Brown on the vocals. I'll let you guys take it away in terms of the art.
Absolutely. I think, Palmer Hayden, he is sort of like a photographer, and from this sketch, you can also see that where he is, and I can almost see him sitting with his sketchbook. This is a study, so sitting with his sketchbook or in front of maybe even an easel, and sketching up what's going on in a club, and that kind of music playing in the background. And if you look at the mood of the place, also is, I can't entirely tell what kind of music is playing, because some of the movements tell me the music is moving a little fast, and then some of the movement tell me they're just like, kind of dancing slow. And so I love that. I love that he captures, like a photographer, what is going on in around him. And I think that's sort of what he did to wherever he went. That's sort of what he did as well. You can kind of trace back and say, oh, this was his neighbor, his older neighbor, who's also a painter, and kind of trace back where he was and where he was and who the subjects were. And yeah.
So I wonder today, looking at this scene, like, what kind of a club was this? Was this some kind of like swank place? Was it a dive? What is your sense, just taking in this image?
I can't tell. Maybe kind of like a dive, but I can't really.
Joan is saying church hall. I like that.
Church hall. I wonder what made you say that.
A rockin' club, says Charlie. Juke joint.
Juke joint. Okay.
Perhaps evocative of Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec.
What?
This is a sweaty juke joint, no doubt. And I also have to say, I just love seeing people having fun that aren't wearing masks. My COVID eyes really especially appreciate this scene.
I think, there's something about artwork showing us movement, showing us sound. I think there's something about artwork that shows us, much like the jitterbug with William H. Johnson's painting, kind of, we can almost hear the music in all of this. And this one, I think, Palmer Hayden did not have a lot of money. He wasn't a very he didn't have lucrative art, art kind of, I don't know, background. And he did what he could. But one of the things that you will notice is that even when he went to Paris and came back, he was one of the people that really highlighted the lives and the characters that were around him who are African American. He strongly believed in showing African Americans, Black people in his art, and that at that time. And I have a quote from him that we have read in the past as well. In this, he says, "I decided to paint to support my love of art rather than have art support me." So yeah, he wasn't after fame or money with his art.
He was compensated in other ways.
He was compensated in other ways, yes. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, Cherie says, I enjoy the women in the front watching, I assume enjoying. Me too. Yeah. Me too. This one, the next piece, because we are a little bit running out of time, but this one, Remy had to leave early today, but she and Lucarissa were, Remy and Dimitri were to cover this piece. So Dimitri, I will try to cover Remy with this one.
That, of course, is Billie Holiday, and I'm not sure that there's anything I need to say about Billie Holiday that people don't know. But one of the things that's really fascinating about her, and I'll try to talk the way she sings, she had this way of elongating the beats, and so musicians who used to play with her were always in constant fear that she was not going to be on the beat. But she was always on the beat, but she would just stretch it out like that. And so, it was always a challenge. It took getting used to accompany Billie Holiday. So great singer,
Yeah, and I love that selection because the woman sitting at the piano, I just imagine that being Billie Holiday. The face looks so similar. So I just really love that. The piece is Charles Lewis Sally Jr., who was an artist, and we started off with Lois Mailou Jones, and much like her, he was an artist and a designer. And so, he just wanted to capture the everyday, life happening around him, around Harlem, things that he saw, and just really capture the day-to-day experiences instead of trying to, come up with something sexy and extraordinary. He was a WPA era artist, and he created. Thank you, Sherry. He created prints and then murals, and then also, lots and lots of etchings as we see here. I was looking, and there's, not a ton of information about him. He also was an educator, but in going through it, there's like he's one of these artists who just kind of falls under the radar. I wish Remy was here to talk about, the quality of his lines. And making this etching, I think it's like, as we're zooming in right here, I think it's a really elegant use of the etching lines to create the forms.
Good question from Ralph. Are the women who are dressed alike in uniforms?
We did think we did think that it kind of is like a military style looking uniform, but I also don't know if they were necessarily in uniforms, or if this was the time where fashion was influenced by military clothing from World War I and II. This is slightly before too, but
Yeah, I wish we had more time, seriously, just talking about the cross-hatching, which Remy pointed out in our meeting a lot, is the ability for the cross-hatching to create this texture that is almost, you can almost touch it and feel the ribs of the lines. You can kind of touch that. And to be able to do that and create light behind them just using lines. There's the light emitting behind them, and then there's light coming from in front of them, and you could almost tell where the light is coming from, but not really. And so doing all of that with just lines is just fantastic, and I absolutely love this piece. And while we're staying on this kind of grayscale tone, and the next piece, Lucarissa. Oh, there we go. All right.
I can't move no more. I can't move no more. Ain't no place but a poor old girl to go.
And Bessie Smith, I think we had one of her pieces also paired, right, Charlie?
I don't think so. I think this is the first one that
Is
we've
this
done,
the
Bessie
first one
Smith.
with Bessie, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
and you know, Bessie
we
Smith.
did Bessie back with the blues. With the blues
Oh, back with the
presentation.
blues. Okay,
Yeah.
when we did the blues, we did Bessie Smith, but not this one. It's, you know, I mean, it's kind of like Billie Holiday. There's so much we can say about Bessie, but this is one of one of her songs that is, it's kind of reflective, and it's sad. It's also kind of clashes with the upbeat tune from the back, and I kind of liked it, and I thought it would be fitting for this piece as well. And so, Lucarissa, do you want to lead us in looking at the art on this
Oh,
one?
Sade, wow. This piece is just so somber for me. When I look at this piece, I almost get a heaviness of heart because it's so somber.
Oh, you got muted, sorry.
Yeah, and I think Lucarissa, the mood of this is obviously, you know, very pensive. You know, I see fear on the face of the children. I see them looking out of a window from a very confined space, perhaps wondering about the outside world and how they will fare in it. It's just such a powerful image that he's created.
It really is. And I was about to say about the young girl that is clutching this headless and limbless doll is heartbreaking. It's just completely heartbreaking. And, you know, then you have this, I'm assuming it's her brother whose hand is on his face, but also what I noticed after we talked about this, it looks like one of his hands may be gripping her hand as well, as if to give some kind of solace or some kind of hope in a hopeless situation. The fact that White has cramped these figures in this small space, and they are visible through this really narrow window, just makes it all the more heart-wrenching, because you can almost feel like, you know, the walls coming in on you. If you look at the top portion, where the top is like mere inches from the top of her head, it's like at some point, you know, you feel the walls actually just kind of coming in on you. This piece is just, it's phenomenal. And you have, you know, the wooden frame and the slats that are in front of them is kind of makes me feel tense, like, you know, there's no way out. there is just no way out. And then, of course, can we talk about how he has created the wood, the grain of the wood? I mean, oh my God, you see the framing that has, the type of grain. Then you see the inside that has that kind of like piney box feel to it on the inside, which then, of course, brought to my mind about a coffin. And I'm just like, this piece is just phenomenally sad. And I believe that he was really just trying to speak to the condition of African American people at that time, and how, there was just that certain feeling at times where there just was no way out, that life would never get better. And I know that he felt like art had a role to play in changing all of that. And I'd like to share a quick quote from him regarding art, which I just thought was phenomenal. And he said, "Art must be an integral part of the struggle. It can't simply mirror what's taking place. It must adapt itself to human needs. It must ally itself with the forces of liberation. The fact is, artists have always been propagandists. I have no use for artists who try to divorce themselves from the struggle."
Oh my God, Lucarissa, I think that's where we need to just end up. Yeah, mic drop, seriously. That was amazing. Thank you so much for that quote. I've never seen it before, and that's really moving. Thank you so much. And I'm just gonna, if you attended this presentation, we will send you links to the music and the art. Thank you so much to you, everyone that joined us today, Charlie for organizing this, and everyone on the panel, Dimitri, Remy, Lucarissa, Rodney. Thank you so much. And if you'd like to support us, there are many ways of supporting us. Become a member. You can text and make a donation, or we're reopening. We're reopening in just about, is it a week? In a week, we're reopening. So we hope to see you at our actual museum. Please check out our website and see the upcoming exhibitions. Thank you so much, and see you next month. We have jazzy hip hop and contemporary art. So we'll see you then.
We're gonna even though we're reopening, we're gonna keep doing these Zoom programs.
Yes,
right?
We are. That's right. Thank you, Rodney. I forgot to mention that we're staying
because we love bringing people together in this way.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, and I'll see you. Also, the recorded ones will be on YouTube as well. And so we'll see you there, and see you at the debriefing team
Momentarily.
Yeah,
Go Giants.
She had to get that in.
I had to get that in.